Yeah, we just wanted to finish up a little bit about the Benos Tzelofchad. You'll recall we were in the middle of a machlokas. The pasuk says, this is in Perek Tesayin, that the Benos Tzelofchad, who are the tribe of Manasseh, they got 4 chalokim in Eretz Yisrael. And even though women did not get their own chalik in the land, but as the Torah says, they got it because they inherited from their father Tzelofchad, and this entitled them to 4 portions. Now the problem is that there are 5 daughters of Tzelofchad. So why would it be that 5 people who are inheriting would get only 4 portions? So Rashi offers, actually from the Gemara and Rav Basra, Rashi offers a pshat that when it says 4 portions, that means they actually inherited from 4 different sources. Yeah, Einachinami. Once they got their land, they divided it 5 ways. But the Navi is not referring to how they divided what they got. Yeah, they divided it 5 ways because there are 5 women. But it's referring to the fact that they had 4 different claims to the land in which they based their Yerusha claim. And Rashi is following here the Mandi Amar, so I'm going to chazer a little bit, that Eretz Yisrael was divided according to Yotzei Mitzrayim, that the population base upon which the land was divided was based on those who left Mitzrayim, meaning any man, it's still a male-based thing, a male who was 20 years old or up when they left Mitzrayim, even though they wound up dying in the desert. Anybody who was 20 when they left Mitzrayim died in the Midbar. But essentially, they were given a chelek in Eretz Yisrael, and when it was distributed to the B'nai Haaretz, it was distributed b'tayras Yerusha, meaning they had to inherit from the Yotzei Mitzrayim. That is the Mandi Amar in the Gemara that says Eretz Yisrael was nischalka lefi Yotzei Mitzrayim. Again, let me remind you, I say this virtually every week, at least once, sometimes more, that the issue of how we divided it among the tribes, was it equal or per capita, that's a separate machlokas. But let's assume once we've defined what a tribe gets, within the tribe we have to divide it according to Rashi's following the Shita, Yotzei Mitzrayim. So Rashi then says the following. Rashi says, Zelophehad himself was Yotzei Mitzrayim. He died in the desert, but he was 20 years old or older at the time of Yetzias Mitzrayim. His father, Chefer, who was obviously older, was also those who left Mitzrayim, meaning he didn't die in Mitzrayim. And Chefer had sons who were Yotzei Mitzrayim. In other words, Tzelofchad's brothers. So essentially, we have 3 groups of people who left Mitzrayim. We have, at least within this family, we have Chefer himself. We have all of Chefer's sons, and that would include Tzelofchad. All of them are Yotzei Mitzrayim. Now, we don't have an exact number. How many sons did Chefer have? Okay? So I'm just going to use this as an example. Let's assume that he had 4 sons plus Tzelofchad, a total of 5, right? So let's just work with the numbers just so we understand it. So it turns out the following. It turns out that Chefer is entitled to a portion of Eretz Yisrael, even though he died in the desert. Tzelofchad is entitled to a portion in Eretz Yisrael, even though he died in the desert. And his 4 brothers are entitled to 4 portions in Eretz Yisrael, even though they died in the desert. So everybody here died in the desert. But if I hold Eretz Yisrael is nischalik liyotzei Mitzrayim, they are essentially post-mortem are given a chelek of Eretz Yisrael. Now, the daughters themselves have no claim to Eretz Yisrael, and indeed, even the men don't have any claim to Eretz Yisrael. They have to claim it based on an inheritance from Yotzei Mitzrayim. So the Mishnah says in Maseches Bava Basra that the daughters of Tzelofchad had 3 claims, and Rashi will kind of invent a 4th claim, but the Mishnah itself identifies the daughters of Tzelofchad as having 3 claims. Claim number 1, which is the simplest, they inherited the portion of land that belonged to their father. Their father was Yotzei Mitzrayim, he would be entitled to a portion of land. And even though initially there was some uncertainty, does a daughter inherit when there are no sons? But HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, daughters inherit. So entitlement number one is whatever our father would have gotten as his portion of land, we inherit. Okay, that's number one. Number two, Chefer is their grandfather. Chefer was entitled to a portion of land. Now, Chefer died in the desert, so Chefer's portion would go to his sons, including Tzelofchad, who died in the desert. So I made up the number. Let's assume there are 4 sons plus Zelophehad. So 1/5 of Chefer's property would have gone to Zelophehad, and the daughters inherit 1/5 of Chefer's property through their father. Right, their father inherits in the grave, and therefore they get a whole portion from Zelophehad, and they get 1/5 of a portion from Chefer. In other words, they get everything that Zelophehad would have gotten. They get 1/5 of what would have gone to Chefer. That's the second entitlement. And the third entitlement is that Zelophehad was a Bechor. And since Zelophehad was a Bechor, when Chefer dies, Zelophehad, even in the grave, inherits a double portion. So instead of getting 1/5, we look at it as if Chefer had 6 sons. And Zelophehad gets 2 out of 6, meaning 1/3. If you add it up together, right? It's 1/3, not just 1/5, because Pi Shnayim means the Bechor is as if he's an extra son. So instead of 5 sons, we have 6 sons. Zelophehad counts as 1 and 2, and therefore he would get 1/3, and that would be inherited by the daughter. So the 3 entitlements that the Mishnah says in Bava Basra, the daughters of Zelophehad get, is they get the entire portion that would have gone to Zelophehad as Yotzei Mitzrayim. They get initially, let's say, 1/5 of the Yerusha of the what would have gone to Chefer, and the third claim is they get the extra that would amount to the Pi Shnayim that Zelophehad would have got in Nichsei Chefer. Now, that's 3 chalakim. That's 3 entitlements. Now, you understand, when I say 3 chalakim, I don't mean 3 equal chalakim. The amount they got from Zelophehad is going to be larger than the amount they got from Chefer, even with the Pi Shnayim adjustment, because they get everything Zelophehad would get. From Chefer, they wind up getting 1/3, meaning 2/3 of what would have gone to Chefer is inherited by his sons, which would then go to their sons. Okay? So when we say 3 chalakim, the Mishnah says, Rashi comes up with 4, we'll come up with that in a minute. When we say B'nai Zelophehad got 3 chalakim b'oretz, the word chelak does not mean equal portion, but it just refers to 3 different entitlement claims that got them their land. So far so good. We've come up with 3. Problem is, the pasuk says they got 4. Okay, so now we have to kvetch a little bit. The Mishnah doesn't really help us here. Where do you get a 4th entitlement? So Rashi posits the following, and this I don't even think the Gemara says. I think Rashi explains it, that some of the sons of Chefer, Zelophehad's brothers, who died in the desert, not only, like Zelophehad had daughters and not sons, but some of his brothers actually died without any children at all. They had no children. Now, what is the order of inheritance? A man dies and has no sons and has no daughters. So the Torah says in Parshas Pinchas, it would go to his father, if his father is alive. If he does not have a father, it will go to his brothers. So when the sons of Chefer died, other than Zelophehad itself, the sons who did not have they too were entitled to a portion of Eretz Yisrael. But if they didn't have sons to inherit it to bequeath it to, it would go to the other brothers, among whom is Tzelofchad, and Zelophehad's daughters will inherit from Zelophehad that which he got from his brothers who did not have children. Okay? And that is the beautiful picture of how the daughters of Zelophehad wind up with 4 portions of land. Again, it doesn't mean 4 equal portions, but 4 different claims. They get Zelophehad's land. They get what Zelophehad would inherited from Chefer. They get the Pishnayim of what Zelophehad inherited from Chefer. And they get a portion of their uncles, of Zelophehad's brothers, who died without any children, and the estate would go to their brothers, including Zelophehad, which would then pass to his daughter, be Yerusha. And that is how we have 4 chalakim, and Einochinami. Once it is determined what land they get, it'll be divided 5 ways, because there are 5 daughters. But the pasuk is not talking about how the daughters divided it. The pasuk is simply telling me that they had 4 claims to the land. This is how Rashi explains this very, very difficult pasuk. Yeah.
How come their uncles didn't get, their wives didn't get any inheritance back in those days?
Yeah. So let me make a point. This might be a difficult point to understand. As strange as it may sound to the modern ear, the Torah does not provide a wife inheriting her husband. A wife, in fact, does not inherit her husband. When a wife dies, the husband inherits his wife, and that's a machlokas in the Gemara. If Yerusha Sabal, the husband's inheritance rights, is a doraisa or drabanan, but at least midrabanan, the husband inherits. But a wife does not inherit, meaning to say when a man dies, his wife's rights are based on the ksuva. She collects the ksuva and the like, and that is a lien, that is a shibud against the property that the Yorshim inherit from their father, but she does not have inheritance rights per se. So the wives of the brothers who did not have children would actually not inherit, even if they were alive. Okay. Now this is how Rashi explains the four chalakim. Now, here is the problem. Rashi works very, very excellently based on the shita of the Gemara that Eretz Yisrael was nischalek based on the Yotzei Mitzrayim, that we took the population base of every man who was 20 years old when they left Mitzrayim, and they're assigned a portion of Eretz Yisrael, and the way it's distributed to the people who come into the land is based on the laws of inheritance. Meaning nobody who came into the land had a direct claim to the land. The claim could only be through the Yerusha of somebody who was 20 years old when they left Eretz Mitzrayim. Now that is a shita in the Gemara, that Eretz Yisrael was nischalek liyotzei Mitzrayim. But there is another shita of the Gemara that says Eretz Yisrael was nischalek lebo'ei ha'aretz, that the population base that was the foundation of how the land was divided were based on the people who actually came to Eretz Yisrael. Now, this gets a little more complicated because here's the thing. There is no opinion whatsoever that we simply divided the land to the Bo'ei Oretz. If that would be the case, the daughters of Zelophehad would have got nothing at all. Because remember, the only people who get a chelik in Eretz Yisrael on their own are men who are 20 years old. So it's impossible that there's any view that says Eretz Yisrael is only nischalek l'Ba'ei Oretz, because if that would be the case, there would be no inheritance, meaning the whole concept of, the daughters inherit Zelophehad's portion. If I hold Ba'ei Oretz, there is no Zelophehad's portion. Zelophehad didn't have a portion in Eretz Yisrael, and everybody has to claim it on their own, and that would only be for a male that was 20. So even though theoretically, one could have thought there is such a position. Eretz Yisrael is divided per capita of Boy Haaretz. There is, in fact, no such position. Rather, the Gemara explains that Boy Haaretz is quite complicated. It starts off with Boy Haaretz, and then it moves into a backwards Yerusha that then turns into a forward Yerusha. And this is the way it works. The initial land is distributed based on the numbers of people who enter Eretz Yisrael, and that only applies to the 20-year-old men, 20 or more men. So, in terms of Tzelofchad's family, again, I'm just going to make up numbers here because we don't have the exact numbers. Remember, Chefer died in the desert, Tzelofchad died in the desert, and his brothers died in the desert. So who came to Eretz Yisrael? The children of those brothers, if the brothers had children, and the daughters of Tzelofchad. Right? That's a population, family group that came to Eretz Yisrael. Now, let's assume, again, please be aware, I'm just making up numbers just for illustration. Let's assume that even though, as we said, some of the brothers didn't have children, let's assume that altogether the brothers of Tzelofchad have 20 boys. Just to keep it simple, we'll make believe there are no daughters in that group. Okay? So there are 20 boys who are 20 years old or more, who maybe I shouldn't call them boys, they're men, they show up. And then we have the daughters of Tzelofchad showing up. Because there are 20 men who are 20 or above, 20 portions of land are assigned to them. And 0 is assigned to B'nos Tzelofchad. But those 20 guys don't keep the 20 portions of land. Rather, there's a Gezerah Sakosov that we do the opposite of what Yerusha normally is. Normal Yerusha, the Gemara says, is the Chayim Yorshim Esamesim. The normal pattern of Yerusha is that the people who are alive inherit from the people who are dead. That's Yerusha. But here we have a Gezerah Sakosov that the dead inherit from the living. And the way it works is you take those 20 portions of land and you vest ownership of that land in the earliest ancestor, linear going up, that left Mitzrayim. So, we have the children of the sons of Chefer who were given 20 portions of land. We move it up. We move it to their parents who died in the desert, but they're not the earliest Yotzei Mitzrayim. We then move it up to Chefer, who was the earliest Yotzei Mitzrayim, because Chefer's father died before Yetzias Mitzrayim. So therefore, the 20 portions of land, 20 chalakim of land that were given initially to these 20 people is treated as if it's Chefer's property. Right? That's the reverse Yerusha of the dead inheriting the living. And once it goes to Chefer, it then goes down. Now you'll notice the following. In this analysis, Zelophehad is an irrelevancy. There is no portion of Zelophehad, because the land was allocated to the 20 grandsons of Chefer, and then it went back to Chefer. In other words, there was no land allocated to Tzelofchad, because even though he was Yotzei Mitzrayim, he was not the earliest generation of Yotzei Mitzrayim. You got to go all the way to the earliest generation. So our problem is this. So we then ask, what do B'nai Tzelofchad get? So here is what they get. They get 2 out of the 3. They do get the chelek that Zelophehad would have gotten in Nichsei Chefer, because once it goes to Chefer, so Zelophehad inherits with his brothers, and the daughters inherit that from Zelophehad. They do get the Pi Shnayim, because they get that from Chefer, but they actually don't get, as strange as it sounds, they actually don't get Zelophehad's Chelek, and the reason is, there is no Zelophehad's Chelek. The only thing that they get from Zelophehad is they get what Zelophehad would have gotten from Chefer, along with his other brothers. So that actually means they only have 2 entitlements. So how do you get the 4? So the answer would have to be, we have to assume that they get from the brothers, and there are 2 brothers who don't have any children. So that once again, it all comes from Chefer, meaning the 20 portions that are given to these 20 guys, there's a reverse Yerusha where it goes back to Chefer, and then it's a regular Yerusha from Chefer down to all of his children. The children who don't have any children will go to the other brothers, and that will include Zelophehad in the grave, and the daughters of Zelophehad will get a portion of that. Okay, it is very, very complicated because it's based on a double Yerusha, which actually means, again, it's a strange dynamic to even explain, meaning you're using the boy Oretz to determine the total portions of land that are allocated, but the land doesn't necessarily go to those 20 people. The land may be divided among a much larger group when you're machzir the nachala to the Yotzei Mitzrayim. Okay, you're machzir the nachala to the earliest ancestor, who left Mitzrayim at the age of 20, and in this case, the earliest ancestor who left Mitzrayim at the age of 20 was Chefer. So essentially, Chefer's grandchildren who are alive bequeath their chalokim to their grandfather who is dead, and then from the grandfather it then goes down through the normal rules of Yerusha, and that is how the daughters of Zelophehad get it. In other words, you understand that this kind of very unusual reverse Yerusha is mukhrach, the Gemara says, because if you were to simply go with a straight Bohei Oretz, simply divide the land to Bohei Oretz, the daughters of Zelophehad would get nothing at all, because they have no direct claim. And since it's a davar pashut, both in the Torah and Beferish in Sefer Yoshua, that the daughters of Zelophehad did get land, behechrich, we have to say that even if I say Bohei Oretz Nischalka, there is a reverse Yerusha, a Gezeres HaKosav, that is called Hamesim Yorshim Esachayim, that those who are dead inherit from those who are alive. Yeah.
So did this have to operate off of Nebuah in order to know what your portion was before you arrived at the land? Or was the portions like unsettled, that I know that on the tzad that I have living descendants who get to Eretz Israel, I'll have a portion, and that portion will be determined once it'll be revealed once they actually get to Eretz Israel.
Yeah, I don't think there was any particular nevuah involved. I think basically your portion will be based on your descendants who come into the land, but that's considered your portion from the time you left Mitzrayim, in a sense.
Right, so I know I have essentially a portion to be determined in terms of
That's
its actual
correct.
size.
That is correct. Okay, so this is just a little bit of just complication, just to understand the complexities of the daughters of Tzelofchad, again, which means, but you see the point here. The point basically is, as strange as it sounds, the common thing that we always say, that the daughters of Tzelofchad inherited the portion of their father. Like this second opinion, there is no portion of their father other than what he would have gotten from Chefer himself. Zelophehad had no autonomous portion in Eretz Yisrael, because if I hold Boy Oretz Nischalka with reverse Yerusha, whatever was given to Chefer's descendants went back to Chefer. It didn't go to Tzelofchad. So there was nothing that Tzelofchad had to bequeath, but he would have had some inheritance rights in what he would have gotten from Chefer. Okay. Now again, let me remind you too, in the same parak, again, this is by way of review, but maybe now that you heard this discussion a second time, I can go back to that too. If you remember, the Bnei Yosef, which really means Bnei Manasseh, had a very big complaint to Yoshua, and they had said that we don't have enough land for our population. There's not enough land here. We want more land. And Yehoshua basically said to them, sorry, you just have to do some more conquest, meaning there's parts of your territory you haven't conquered, go and conquer it and the like. So the question would be, what is the complaint of Bnei Yosef? Because they were not the largest tribe. Ephraim or Manasseh were not the largest tribe. There were tribes that were larger. So why were they complaining that they didn't have enough land? So again, it very much depends on this machlokas. That is the following. It is true that Shevet Manasseh in particular was not the largest tribe. But it is also true that they had the largest differential in the two censuses, meaning at the time of Yetzias Mitzrayim, they were a certain size, and by the time they entered Eretz Yisrael, they had doubled. So even though they were not the largest tribe, they had the greatest rate of growth. So, if I hold, and this is Rashi's Shita throughout Sefer Yoshua, that I simply go with a straight Bohei Haaretz Chalukah. Straight Bohei Haaretz. The tzvacha of Bnei Yosef is very understandable. Again, I'm sorry, I don't remember the numbers. Now, these numbers are in the Chumash, so if I don't remember it, it's my fault. But let's assume it went from 50 to 100. Again, these numbers we have to check because they are in the Chumash itself. So if I hold Bohei Haaretz, then they were given a total of 50,000 shares in the land, when now they have a population base of 100,000. So they're complaining. The fact that they're not the largest tribe, so what? But if they have the largest differential in population, they're being cheated, so they think. So the tzvacha of Bnei Yosef is very, very pashut if I understand Yotzei Mitzrayim Nischalka, because indeed, they were much, much smaller at the time of Yetzias Mitzrayim than they were when they entered Eretz Yisrael. But if I hold Bohei Haaretz, even if there's a reverse Yerusha, which may affect how individual people get it, but the land they were allocated was based on their size. So what are they complaining about? Right? In other words, if I hold Bohei Haaretz, the tzvacha of Bnei Yosef is much harder to understand. So Ein Chinami. So the Meforshim say that they were complaining because even though they got enough land for their population, but so much of it was not conquered, or they felt they couldn't conquer it, so they felt they were shortchanged in that way. Or some say that just like their population grew for the people who were 20, they also had a lot of kids below 20, which means they had a whole big population of adolescents, and there wasn't enough land to take care of them. So it would either be what is called the tfalim, meaning the kids under 20, or the inability to conquer, meaning there was no direct complaint on their official population base, because that was taken care of in the Bohei Haaretz. Okay, so that's so just remember the two sugyas in Perek Tes Zayin about Manasseh are the Bnei Tzelofchad issue, and the issue of what is called the tzvacha, the complaint of Bnei Yosef, that actually means Manasseh. Okay, and these sugyas are related to the issue of Eretz Yisrael Nischalka LeBohei Haaretz or LeYotzei Mitzrayim. And the next time you come across Bava Basra, and if you're Zeicha to try to learn the whole Maseches, so when you get to Yesh Nochel in the 8th Perek, which is about Yerusha, you will see these things discussed quite extensively. Question, yeah.
It sounds like the Boa Arts one has a couple problems. One is that it's a lot more intricate and two, it makes the taina more difficult to understand.
Yeah.
So what's driving that view? Why is it? What's the evidence?
Yeah, okay, so again, I mean, the Gemara in Bava Basra goes through this extensively, but that is the following. I mean, textually, in the Chumash, they have a very, very strong case, because in Parshas Pinchas, Hashem commands, this is the 40th year, count the new generation that is entering, and after it counts it, it says, Lo Eila, to these people shall you divide the land. So the simple narrative that, but dafka after the second minyan, La'ela techalei haaretz, that does have a mashmaut of yotz of boy haaretz, right? So that's and the Gemara even has to explain how the other opinion will learn La'ela techalei haaretz, etc. So it is based on psukim. But you're 100% right. Boy haaretz is very, very, very complicated, and the reason is because if it would have been a straight boy haaretz, it actually would have been the simplest. You simply look at the population coming in and divide it. But that's impossible. There is no opinion in the Gemara, in Chazal, that could possibly say, L'boy Oretz Nischalka without the Yerusha adjustment, because if that would be the case, B'nai Tzelofchad would get nothing at all. Because a woman does not have a direct claim as a boy Oretz. So Behechrech, you gotta, sumish, you gotta mix in this reverse Yerusha with boy Oretz that makes it a much more complicated formula. Do we understand the svaris for all this? I have to admit, I'm not sure I understand the svaris. It's hard enough just to get the picture of what's going on. But these are the two opinions in the Gemara itself. And this is besides the other machlokas, the Gabi, the tribes. Are they equal divisions or in large or smaller divisions? That's a separate machlokas. That's a machlokas regarding the tribe, how the tribes were divided. And now we're talking about within the tribes, how you divide it. Of course, the truth of the matter is, the machlokas is even relevant on that, meaning if I hold that each tribe got a portion based on its population, you'll then have the same debate, which population? Okay, that's a separate issue, but the Ramban holds that the tribes were equal, so the machlokas of which population is not relevant like the Ramban. On the tribal level, on the inter-tribe level, it's only relevant within the tribe. Okay. Alrighty. Okay. Now, the next thing I just want to mention is, so again, the land is being divided. Again, let me remind you of our map here. We have Yehuda. We have Binyamin. I'm going south to north. Yehuda. And in Yehuda is Shimon. Shimon has cities in Yehuda. North of Yehuda is Binyamin. North of Binyamin is Ephraim. North of Ephraim is Manasseh, with the other half of Manasseh being east of the Jordan River. And then north of Manasseh, you've already reached the Yam Kinneret. You have Yisachar, Zebulun, Naphtali. And along the Mediterranean coast, you have part of Yehuda. Yehuda goes all the way to the coast. And then you have Dan, and then you have Asher. And Asher is the furthest north of the tribes. Okay, so Shimon does not have a separate chelek. Shimon is dispersed within Yehuda. Ruvain, Gad, and part of Manasseh are east of the Yarden. And Shevet Levi, we will see, has 48 cities located in all of the tribes. Okay, so that's kind of the map. So hopefully you can keep a picture of that map. I think I did mention to you a bit of a problem here, because according to this map, which is based on the cities that are described, Zebulun did not have direct access to the Mediterranean, right? Because the only tribes that are on the coast are Yehuda to the very south, and then you have Asher. Then you have Dan, and then you have Asher. Right? Zebulun is not on the Mediterranean coast. And yet, we find in Yaakov Avinu's blessing, he talked about Zebulun l'chof yamim. Zebulun is on the seashore. And we know the famous bracha of Yisachar and Zebulun. Yisachar was osek b'Torah. Zebulun was osek in maritime commerce. And Zebulun used his resources to help Yisachar. That presupposes a sea ship going around the seas. right? So how do we explain this if based on the boundaries, Zebulun is not on the Mediterranean? So there are different pshatim of learning it. Some learn that when it says Zebulun was involved in the Yam, the sea, it is not referring to the Yam HaGadol, which is the Mediterranean. It's referring to the Yam Kinneret, which is called the Yam, right, to this day. Yam Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee. And the Sea of Galilee was very, very fertile for fishing and also for things like the chilazain, the snail, which produced the techeles, which could be sold for a lot of money. So Einochinami, the image that Zebulun is on the Mediterranean, that is. Okay, I'll be finished in a minute. Yeah, that is a source of wealth. So Yamim does not mean the Mediterranean. Yamim means the Yam Kinneret. That's one pshat. The other pshat is that Zebulun did have a narrow road, that even though the Shvatim on the shore of the Mediterranean were Dan and Asher, but Zebulun had a certain access, and somehow, and I don't know why that would make them bigger traders than Dan and Asher. Dan and Asher had many more miles, but some want to say Zebulun had a corridor from his Chelek into the Mediterranean, and he was able to develop that into great, great commerce. But the point I just want to make is, in terms of the map, Zebulun's territory was not on the Mediterranean coast. So that's something to think about. Okay, we'll go for the Hezbollah.
Thank you for listening to this Ohr Somayach production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.